Christy, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Flower Friends. So I've stamped the images I'll be using on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Cartabella Here, There, and Everywhere 6x6. So I'm going to tear out the piece that I want to use as color inspiration and tuck that under my cardstock panel so I can pull my color palette from there. I'm using my Copic markers today, and I decided to pull out some warm grays for my bunny. I'm using W00, W1, and W3. And I'm starting with that lightest shade today, that W00, and kind of marking out some patches where I eventually want the darkest shades to go. I just wanted to do that with the lightest shade in case I didn't like where I placed them, and that way I could change my mind. But I did like them. One of the things that I love about coloring bunnies is how many different ways there are to do them, from different color combinations to different patterns and patches. So today I thought I would try something a little bit different. So I darkened that up by going in with the W3, blending out with the W1, and then before I even went in with the W00, I could see that I wanted that to be darker, so I went in with a second layer of the W3, just deepening that up a little bit more. And I'm going back to the W1 and blending that out, just trying to soften that. I normally color darkest to lightest except for when I do things like hair, but in this instance I just wanted to be sure of where I wanted to place everything before I went in with those darkest shades. That's kind of why I worked my way up to the darker colors and built up that saturation. So I have filled her all in, but I still wasn't happy with the depth. So I decided to go one shade darker and add in the W5. Originally I thought this was going to be too dark, but once I had all those colors laid in, I could see that I just needed to have that little bit of depth, especially in the creases right around the ears and on her legs right up under her skirt. And then I just blended down in the reverse using the W3, and the W1 became my lightest on this layer. And then to finish her off, I'm going to add the W1 to add some shadows to the white areas and blend that out with the W00. Just put a little bit on her forehead and on her neck, and then blended her legs into her feet. I'm going to keep that W5 out and add in the W7 and W9 to do every other stripe on the bees. Just adding a touch of that W9 because it is quite dark, and then blending it out with just a little bit of that W7, and then using the W5 for a highlight. Those bees are so super tiny, so I'm just using the very tip of the marker to do that. I'm also going to use these shades for the wheels on her wagon. I put the W9 down at the bottom and then blend it up with the W7. And then that top area I'm going to fill in with the W5. Just making sure that it is really well blended because those are quite dark shades. And then for the rest of the bee, I'm going to use Y13 and Y15, just the two shades because they're so super tiny. But I will go back in with a little extra of that Y15 to add a bit extra dimension there. I'm also going to take those shades and just add in some centers to some of the flowers. Just wanted to have a little bit of extra yellow on there for some pop. I even did one flower there completely in yellow, and I'm also going to do the little button on the bunny's dress in these shades. Then I'm going to move on to some blue violets. I'm pulling that out of that pattern paper. I'm going to use that for the bird since there's not really any blue combos in that pattern paper. It's more of like a blue-violet tone. So I went with BV01, BV02, and BV04. And again, to do something a little bit different like the bunny, I left a little white area around the bird's eye And I decided to soften that by adding in the BV quadruple zero to just kind of bridge that gap between the blue violets and the white. And I'm also going to take those shades and color in some of the flowers in the wagon. So I just picked kind of the flowers that look similar. Initially, I did leave off the one on the right there. I just thought I would do that in a different shade so I would have more flowers in different combos, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought it might look strange since it was the only other flower that was identically shaped to the ones that I'd done in the blue violets, so I went ahead and colored that to match. And then I am also going to just do the bee's wings with the BV quadruple zero. Instead of any blue to add a little bit of color, I thought I would use the blue violet. That wasn't quite prominent enough, so I added the tiniest touch of the BV01 to that mix and then blended that back out with the BV quadruple zero. Then I'm moving on to some really pale pinks. I'm using R00, R01, and R02 to pull out that corally pink from that pattern paper. I'm going to do the bunny's nose and give everybody some rosy cheeks, including the bees, and also the bunny's ears. So just a little bit of that R02 for the cheeks and the ears, blending out with the R01. And then I will add the R00 into the ears as well since there is more space to cover there. And I did blend out the bunny's cheeks with that as well. I'm also going to do her dress in this combo. I thought it would be pretty to have a really pale pink dress, and then I could add some more detail to that later on. So I'm going to do the R02 for the shadows. Just adding in any little creases on the sides of the sleeves, the sides of the dress, and then where her arms are folded in front over her belly. That would also cast a little shadow there, blending out with the R01 and filling in with the R00. And then I felt like the contrast got lost in there, so I did go back in with a second layer of everything just to increase that saturation, and especially in the shadowed areas. Sticking with those corally pinks, I'm going to switch to R21, R22, and R24 to do the darker flowers that are in that pattern paper. And I just picked a couple of these other flowers there to do with that combo. Actually, I guess it's all the rest of the flowers. So the two that are the largest in that wagon, and then also the one that the bird is holding. And then I'm going to move on to some greens using YG13, YG17, and G28. I'm going to do the wagon with this combo. I've really been loving this combo lately. I think it is really nice for spring. It has a lot of depth to it with that G28 and a lot of brightness with that G13, so it really does make a nice fresh springtime green. So I'm going to fill in that wagon, and then I'm going to use those same shades to do all of the stems and leaves, but because they're so small, I'm just using one shade for each of those and just switching which ones I'm going to use. So I did a few of the leaves with the G28, a few with the YG17, and then I'm going to do the rest with the G13, and also just fill in some of the white spaces between the flowers to make the wagon look more full. I'll use E50 to add a little bit of a creamy shade to the collar of the bunny's dress and the centers of the wagons. And then I'm going back to that R02 to add some little polka dots to her dress. Just doing little circles there. I feel like she's turning out very cottagecore, which I love, especially with that pattern paper, which I think is just absolute cottagecore, you know, with all of those gorgeous little flowers on there. So just doing some little polka dots. They didn't quite turn out dark enough, especially once it started to dry back. So I am going to switch out for a slightly darker shade and use that R21 to just go over them once again. Just going right over the ones I've already colored just to make them just a little bit more saturated so they stand out a bit more. And then later on at the end, I'm going to add more detail again. But that looks good for now. So I'm going to take my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and get that going. And I'll go over the eyes of my bird and my bunny. I did not do the bees because they're so tiny it would almost make them too big. But I'm going to trim these out with their matching dies. For the background, I'm going to take a small piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and the Lawn Fawn Cloudy Stencil, and then I'm blending on some shaded lilac Distress Oxide ink. So the shaded lilac was a little bit too purple, but any of the blues that I had were too blue. So to create kind of my own blue-violet look, I decided to combine the shaded lilac with the speckled egg and just go over that and kind of blend those two together for each of those clouds. The first time I started with the shaded lilac, the second time I started with the speckled egg. It didn't really matter because I was blending them both together. And yeah, and I just kept turning that stencil so that I could get a different cloud formation. And I did spread them out a little bit farther than I normally do, just for a little bit of a different look. I'll add a little extra color down at the bottom just so that last cloud isn't so stark white. And then I'm going to grab the MFT Drifts and Hills stencil and lay that over top just so I can have like a little grassy hill for her to stand on. And then I'm going to take some Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink and I'll blend that off the stencil onto the cardstock. Just really soft. I didn't want this to get too dark. And then I'm going to take some Shabby Shutters for the bottom and I'll blend that out so that it's nice and soft and hazy. And then I'm going to take one of the Hello Bluebird nesting oval dies. This was the 7th smallest. And I'm going to trim this panel out. So I have a oval shaped focal panel, which I haven't done in a really long time. On that panel, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. So I popped that in my MISTI. And I'm taking the sentiment from Flower Friends that says, "Hello Friend," in a really beautiful little script. Stamping that down twice to make sure that I have a nice bold impression. I'll set that aside to dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using Lawn Fawn Guava cardstock and Lobster ink. And again, I'm taking another sentiment and an image from the Flower Friends. I love that little fox. I think she's so sweet. You could also recreate this same card and put the fox on the focal panel instead. I think it could go either way. I'm going to go back to that Cartabella Here, There, and Everywhere pattern paper pad and choose another print to use with the floral. I'm also going to use the green polka dot that is on the back of the floral. And I wanted to try a really different layout. I don't think I've ever done this one before, but I was kind of scrolling on Pinterest and looking for different card designs, and I found this little sketch here, so I thought that I would try this out. And I'm gonna just add my liquid glue directly to the card front, and then I'm gonna pick up that pattern paper and lay it down at an angle on the card front. I thought this was the easiest way to get the right cut without having to measure everything out. And then I'm going to take that pink plaid and push that down on the other side right next to it, keeping that diagonal in a straight line. I'm going to give that a few seconds to dry, and then I'll grab my Cutter Bee scissors and trim off all of the excess. So it'll be a perfect fit, covering the entire front of that A2 standard size card. It is 4 1/4 wide and 5 1/2 tall. So once I have those trimmed out, I'm actually going to take that green print that was on the back of the floral, and I'll add some liquid glue to fill in the bottom section of the card front, and then I'm going to line that up and press that into place. Really rub that down and make sure that it is on there nice and secure. And then I'm going to repeat that process and trim off the excess. And I think this was a really fun and different card design. It reminds me of like a crazy quilt, which is also very cottagecore. So yeah, I'm really happy with how that turned out. As I was tucking the scraps back into the paper pad, I saw this yellow and white gingham, and I thought that might be nice to use as well. So I actually die cut another of the nesting ovals. I used the 6th largest one this time. And I'm going to glue the focal panel to that. You're not going to see too much of it, but you will get little flashes of yellow around the outside edge, which just frame it up really nicely. I think it almost looks like a gold frame, but it really has that country feel to it. And I am going to pop that up on my card front. So I've added some foam tape to the back. I'll peel off those release papers, and I'm going to center that over toward the right hand side, kind of right where the 3 pieces of pattern paper meet. And I'm just making sure there's the same distance from the top of the card and the bottom of the card. And then I'm going to start to add in my images. So I'll use the largest one first. That's typically how I like to do it. I'm going to add the bunny with her little wagon a little bit to the left so that I have room on her right for the little bird. I'll place that right there with that little flower kind of bending over in front of her foot. And then I'll take that little trio of bees and I'll use that to fill in the space over on the left-hand side, as if they've just gathered the pollen from that wagon of flowers and now they're off to the hive to make their honey. So I am going to add a little bit of stardust stickles, just a little tiny squeeze to each of the bees' wings so that they have a nice iridescent look to them. I'll also add it to all of the flowers. The ones that you just see from the side, I added it to the whole flower, but the other ones I just did to the centers. And then I also decided to add a little dab of glue to each of the polka dots on her dress. So she has little sparkly polka dots, and I think that just really draws your eye to those as well. So it's a nice, sweet little detail. And that is going to finish off this card. I'll lift that up so you can see all of the detail and give you another peek at the inside. I really, really love how this one turned out. I think it's so very sweet. I hope that you enjoyed it too. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. I post new ones every Monday and Friday. All of the products I use will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.